The story opened with Mujin battling the squad leader Chilbo, and it quickly became clear that Mujin was completely overwhelming him. He toyed with his opponent as if he were a child, even dodging an attack while still in midair. That only enraged Chilbo further, and he demanded that Mujin stop acting so lightly and fight him like a man. Mujin then dropped down, lifted his 100-kilo sword as though it weighed nothing, and rushed forward as both men charged at each other. In the clash, Mujin pulled his blade back at the last moment and struck Chilbo's sword with such force that it was knocked aside. Seizing the opening, he drove a punch into Chilbo's face, nearly flattening his nose and sending him crashing to the ground. Everyone watching was stunned, because Mujin had never been this strong before. To understand how he was able to overpower a squad leader so easily, the story then went back to the beginning. Mujin was once known as the Divine Demon, a terrifying swordsman who had taken on 9 powerful sect leaders in a quest for vengeance. His sword skills were so precise and deadly that even those sect leaders struggled to understand how he was cutting them down. One by one, they were reduced to helpless victims, and they could only conclude that Mujin was a monster. Even after several of them managed to pin him down and drive a sword through his heart, he still fought on and sent them all to the afterlife, earning the title of the Divine Demon. Just when he was about to die, his life flashed before his eyes, and he felt a strange sense of relief, as if he had finally fulfilled his purpose. He remembered the days when he had been attacked by 3 children because he had been a troublemaker in the Murim world, and how his master had saved him and trained him. But in the end, he had lived by the sword and killed countless people. He began to wonder whether life was really nothing more than violence and bloodshed. Then he remembered his late wife. The happiest moments of his life had been the ones he had spent with her, but those moments had been taken from him. Filled with tears, he questioned the meaning of his life, and in the end, he closed his eyes and died. Then, suddenly, he heard people shouting all around him. At first, he thought he had ended up in hell, but when he opened his eyes, he found an annoying group standing in front of him and insulting him. Mujin was completely confused, because he did not understand what was happening at all. Beside him stood 2 children, and the younger boy defended his elder brother by saying that they could not hand over the clan's martial arts while his brother was still alive. He insisted that no matter what happened, the martial arts had to remain within the Manhwa clan. While Mujin was still trying to make sense of everything, the opposing leader suggested a deal to settle things quickly. He addressed Mujin as Hua Mujin and said that, since the clan was poor, he was willing to offer money in exchange for the clan's martial arts. The terms were simple: they would duel, and the winner would take everything. The younger boy was shocked, because everyone knew that Mujin was useless when it came to martial arts. Tired of all the noise, Mujin asked who the hell Mujin was, because he knew perfectly well that he was not the person they thought he was. His so-called siblings were stunned and looked at him as if he had lost his mind. Even the rival leader asked what he meant, and Mujin replied that he was the Divine Demon. That only made the man laugh. He mocked Mujin and told him to call him the king of the underworld instead. The rival introduced himself as Chong Dobo, the second son of the Chongwa merchant group. Mujin's siblings became furious, saying that Dobo's madness had gone too far, and that he was speaking complete nonsense. Even the master of the Chongwa merchant group, Bukyun, mocked the clan, saying it was already finished because the eldest son had lost his mind. Mujin stayed silent as he tried to understand what was going on. Since he did not refuse, Dobo assumed he had accepted the duel and announced that it would take place at Bong Pavilion next month. He reminded Mujin that the agreement had been made under the martial arts code, so breaking it would bring serious consequences. After the group left, Mujin's supposed siblings turned to him and asked what he planned to do, since he had been forced into a duel. To make matters worse, he had apparently never even swung a sword before. Mujin laughed when he heard that, because swordsmanship was the very thing he had lived and breathed in his previous life. He tried to access his inner energy, only to realize that it was completely gone. On top of that, the body he was inhabiting was frail and weak. His sister burst into tears and begged him to come to his senses. She called him trash for letting the merchant group walk all over him. Her brother scolded her for speaking so harshly and told her to apologize, but she refused. She blamed Mujin for their parents' deaths and ran off in tears. The younger boy apologized on her behalf and said she sometimes lost control of her anger, then he left as well. Mujin was left bewildered, unable to believe that even children hated him, and called him a madman. The last thing he remembered was cutting down the sect leaders without mercy, so he could not understand how he had ended up in this strange body. Frustrated, he collapsed to the ground and wondered who those kids even were. That was when a strange man, apparently his assistant, came running over and asked why he had gone outside with such a weak body. He said he had been worried about him, but Mujin simply asked who he was, since he did not recognize him at all. The man Masak was shocked and assumed Mujin was suffering another seizure caused by his madness. Believing that Mujin truly had amnesia, he decided to explain everything. According to him, Hua Mujin had once been a gifted and respected child whom several orthodox sects had wanted as a disciple. By the age of 23, he had already become the clan's leader. Masach seemed exhausted from repeating the same story over and over again, saying he had already explained it thousands of times. Mujin, however, dismissed the idea that this body had ever been promising, since its energy core was obviously ruined. He then asked about the madness everyone kept mentioning. Masach explained that 17 years earlier, Mujin and Dobo had held an unofficial duel and agreed not to use inner energy. At the time, Mujin was 6 years old while Dobo was 9. The fight began under those terms, but midway through, Dobo broke the agreement and struck Mujin with a punch infused with inner energy. Mujin was furious and asked why Dobo had used the 7-wound fist technique when they had clearly agreed to fight only with their fists. Dobo only mocked him and said the technique had been passed down through the Kongdong sect. He also mentioned that the technique's aftereffects were no joke, since he had already tested it on his older brother and left him bedridden. That explained why Mujin was now considered a madman. Everyone believed his current condition was the aftereffect of the 7-wound fist strike. Mujin was furious that Dobo had made him useless and was now the one demanding a duel. He asked what had happened to Dobo afterward, and Masach explained that Mujin's father had handled the matter. Even though Dobo was his cousin and the son of the Chongwa merchant group, one of the top 10 merchant families in the Central Plains, he had only received a warning. Mujin could not believe how useless his father must have been to let that slide. He then asked where his parents were. Masach revealed that Mujin's condition had gradually worsened, and his father had gone into debt trying to find a cure. 9 years earlier, his mother had died of illness, and 3 years after that, his father had joined her. In the end, Mujin had become the son who ruined the clan and drove his parents to their deaths. As a result, the clan's reputation had collapsed, leaving only 2 loyal retainers and a few martial artists. Mujin also had a younger brother Hua Dajin and a younger sister Soyan. At last, Mujin understood why his sister had accused him of causing their parents' deaths. That night, Mujin studied the old records left behind by the original owner of the body and learned the truth. 30 years had passed since he had defeated the 9 sects, and now he had been reborn in the body of a madman with no energy core. Since he carried no regret from his past life, he decided to live as Hua Mujin and help the helpless children around him. Still, he knew that the Chongwa merchant group would be a serious problem, because they were the ones who had crippled the body and helped destroy the clan. His first priority was the duel with Dobo, which was only a month away. Since this body was trash, he decided he would have to rebuild it from the beginning. He sat down to meditate and began again like a beginner. He remembered that in his previous life, cultivating had not been easy the first time either. However, things went surprisingly smoothly in this body, thanks to its overwhelming innate martial aptitude. Mujin drew upon the body's terrifying energy and pushed it to its limits, causing golden light to burst across the room. His struggle and screaming were heard by Masach and the retainers, who rushed in and found him collapsed on the floor. One of them joked that he looked dead, but after checking his pulse, he realized it had become stronger than before. Mujin suddenly grabbed the retainer and demanded to know why his body was in so much pain simply because he had tried to form an energy core. The retainer was confused, so Mujin repeated his question and asked whether the body had some special constitution. The retainer then revealed that Mujin possessed the heavenly martial bodhi, a rare heroic constitution chosen by the heavens. Mujin was struck by another wave of pain and finally understood the problem. The body was the exact opposite of demonic arts. A body filled with pure righteous energy would suffer unbearable pain if it tried to practice demonic techniques. Furious, he screamed in frustration and wondered why he had been given such a cursed constitution of all things. With only a month left before the duel, the situation looked even worse. Lying there in pain, he asked Masach who the 2 men were. Masach explained that the one in green was the chief steward, Dokshin, and the one in red was Elder Zhou Huanbong. The moment Mujin heard the name Zhou, something from his past life flickered in his mind, but the pain was too intense and he passed out. 3 days later, Mujin finally got back on his feet, though Masach worried that he was still not resting enough. Mujin said he was tired of lying around because he had a duel coming up, and he told Masach to bring him swords. Masach almost laughed, because the clan was struggling just to afford food, yet Mujin was asking for swords. When Mujin asked whether the family had no money, Masach admitted that they were already taking loans from an unorthodox sect called the Bango sect. Because of their extremely high interest rates, the clan had fallen even deeper into debt. Mujin immediately realized that, if he wanted to save the clan, he would have to solve the money problem first. He did not think taking out more loans would matter much, since they were already drowning in debt anyway. Masach was worried, but Mujin told him to keep quiet and write a letter to the 2 elders, because he was going out for a walk. When the elders heard that Mujin had gone to the dangerous Bango sect, they became worried. Soon after, Mujin and Masach arrived at the sect's entrance. Mujin told the large guard to inform his boss that he wanted to meet him. The guard Kang No was not in the mood to play games and told Mujin to go inside if he was there to gamble. Mujin insisted that he wanted to see the boss, which only irritated Kang No further. Masach quickly stepped in and urged the guard to calm down, explaining that Mujin was not quite right in the head. The tension kept rising until the vice master of the sect, Majungbo, appeared and asked what the problem was. Kang No told him that Mujin wanted to meet their top boss. Ma asked why, and Mujin calmly said he wanted more loans. Ma told him he did not need to meet the leader just to get a loan and invited him inside. Mujin and Masach were then escorted deeper into the manor, crossing a wooden bridge while armed swordsmen watched them closely. Masach grew increasingly uneasy and told Mujin that they still had a chance to turn back. Mujin refused, saying they had already come too far. Masach then mentioned that an old woman had once seen the sect leader fight and that he had overwhelmed his opponent in only a few seconds. He explained that the leader was a martial artist who had mastered a powerful killing technique. Mujin wondered why Masach was telling him this, but Ma cut in and said that Masach had caught on quickly. By then it was too late. They had entered a deeper part of the cave, and before long they were surrounded by armed swordsmen. Mujin realized the trap at once and asked Ma if this had been his plan from the beginning. Ma admitted it had. He said he had brought Mujin in because he could not lay a hand on him in public, but he was not going to show him the same mercy that had once been given to his parents. Masach begged them to spare his master's life. Mujin, however, was enraged when Ma mentioned his parents, until he suddenly remembered that he was now in another body. Since everything had been set up, Ma ordered his men to teach Mujin a lesson. One of the men charged forward and threw a punch at him. Masach almost fainted at the sight, but Mujin blocked the strike and shattered the attacker's bones from the inside. The man screamed and fell to the ground, accusing Mujin of using dirty tricks. Mujin mocked him and said that his bones were softer than he looked. He then realized that he could not rely on brute force alone and would need to fight more carefully. Ma became furious that his men were wasting time and ordered them to finish him off. A swordsman rushed at Mujin, but Mujin easily dodged the attack and quickly understood that he had to keep moving, since he could not match the man's strength head-on. Using the flexibility of the new body, he avoided the strike and delivered a brutal headbutt that crushed the opponent's face. As the man stumbled back in pain, another swordsman stepped in and slashed at Mujin, but Mujin evaded the blade. When the attacker tried again, Mujin leaped backward and finished him with a swift kick, knocking him out of the fight. Before the armed men could understand what was happening, Mujin had already toyed with them and sent them crashing to their knees. From a distance, Sok shouted in panic, asking whether his master was all right. Mujin brushed him off and called him a dull, witted fool, saying that he was perfectly fine. Sok was stunned and immediately asked where Mujin had learned such martial arts. Mujin replied that what Sok had just seen was not martial arts at all, but something he had picked up on the streets. Sok was even more confused because he had never known Mujin to spend time living like that. Ma praised Mujin for dealing with his men so quickly, then suddenly hurled a coin at him with frightening force. The coin missed by a hair, but the pressure behind it was enough to shock Mujin. Ma then ordered his men to leave, saying he would handle Mujin himself. Mujin was surprised by the hostility, since all he had wanted was to speak with their leader. Ma coldly replied that a trash like Mujin had no right to meet his boss. With that, he drew his sword and charged. What followed left everyone stunned. Mujin blocked Mai's powerful strike with a pair of chopsticks. Ma could not believe it, but Mujin had no sword because he could not afford one. The two exchanged blows as Mai pressed forward with everything he had, yet Mujin held his ground with sharp, efficient movement. Then, in a flash, Mujin caught an opening and drove one of the chopsticks straight through Mai's hand. Ma could hardly believe that he had been outmaneuvered by something so simple. Mujin, however, treated the whole fight like a joke. He warned Ma not to underestimate chopsticks, then continued striking him with them while pointing out how poor his skills were. Ma refused to accept defeat to a pair of chopsticks and leaped into the air, preparing to finish things with his strongest technique. He looked terrifying as he descended, but Mujin remained calm and slipped out of the way with ease. Ma was left open and Mujin followed up with a crushing punch that shattered the last of his pride. Terrified, Ma finally agreed to sit down and talk. Even his guards lowered their heads before Mujin. Once Ma was seated, he asked what Mujin wanted. Mujin immediately questioned why the Banco sect had lent money to his family without any collateral, because he could sense malicious intent in the arrangement. Mai tried to deny it, but Mujin saw right through him. Feeling the pressure, Mai eventually admitted that the orders had come from the Changhua merchant group. Mujin had already suspected as much, so he asked what kind of deal they had made. Ma hesitated, but Mujin told him that if he died protecting the merchant group, no one would care. That was enough to make Ma confess that the merchant group had ordered the Banco sect to lend money at absurdly high interest, and that once the Hua clan collapsed, the sect would be rewarded with the clan's land. Mujin then realized that the family land had always been the true target. He asked how much the 300 gold coins would grow to under the contract, and Ma revealed that the repayment would become 5,000 gold coins in a year. Disgusted, Mujin still accepted the loan. He then asked who cleaned up their messes, and Ma mentioned that they had support from the Four Martial Heavens, an alliance of unorthodox sects. Sok was shocked to hear that name, but Mujin only dismissed the matter and said he did not have time to explain everything. Soon after, the box containing the 300 gold coins arrived, and Mujin's eyes lit up as soon as he saw it. He told Sok it was time to leave, though Sok remained doubtful about borrowing money from such a dangerous group. Mujin ordered him to stop complaining and carry the money. At the entrance, Mujin told Ma to record the date in the ledger and promised that, after dealing with the Changhua merchant group, he would clear all of the clan's debts. He also warned Ma not to prey on ordinary people, because there would be consequences if they kept doing so. Ma agreed on the surface, but inside he was furious and hoped to see Mujin suffer later. When Sok and Mujin returned home, the two elders rushed to greet them. They were alarmed by the blood on Mujin's clothes, but he assured them that it was not his. When they asked what had happened at the sect, he calmly explained that he had gone there to borrow money. He said the clan needed funds so the warriors could be fed and the little they had left would not disappear. The elders were suspicious at first and assumed he had stolen the money, but Mujin told them that the sect had written everything down in its ledger. He then asked them only to care for his siblings and make sure they had enough food and clothing. After giving his instructions, he wished them luck and walked away. Mujin later visited his parents' memorial room. Since he had never truly had parents in his previous life, he struggled to say anything at first. Eventually, he spoke to them honestly and said that the money problem had been solved. He promised to take care of his siblings and the clan's retainers, and he urged his parents to rest in the afterlife. He also promised that he would beat Dobo in the duel. Unknown to him, Sun and Dojin were watching, and both children were deeply impressed. Later, Mujin ordered 3 swords weighing 50-80 and 110 kilos. The servants nearly collapsed bringing them in, but Mujin was simply relieved that they had finally arrived. Sok asked what he intended to do with such heavy swords, and Mujin replied that he planned to do what everyone did with a sword, swing it. He reached for the 50-kilo sword first, only to realize that the body was far weaker than he had hoped. Still, he was not ready to give up. With both hands, he managed to lift it slightly. Seeing Sok staring at him in disbelief, he told him to stop wasting time and prepare his meal, making sure to add plenty of meat. Mujin then reflected on the fact that he had only 2 weeks left to train before the duel. The heavenly martial body was completely opposite to the demonic arts his master had taught him, so he concluded that the only thing he could do was learn the martial arts of his master's friend, the peerless 9 swords. Refusing to quit, he began swinging the sword inside the house, forcing his body to adapt through sheer repetition. Meanwhile, Dobo received word that Mujin had dealt with the Bango sect so harshly that their men would be bedridden for 2 weeks. He was shocked, because Mujin had no energy core and should not have been capable of that. Instead of worrying, Dobo smiled wickedly and began planning something sinister for the duel. He wanted to see what Mujin was hiding. Mujin continued training in the hardest way possible, pushing the heavenly body to its limits. Sok helped him by preparing everything he needed, and Mujin gradually started building up his strength. He practiced the first form, then moved on to the second and third. He remembered his old master saying that no matter what weapon he faced, he would eventually come out victorious. At first, the training overwhelmed him, but he forced himself to endure. Before long, he was moving more naturally, leaping through the room with the sword as though it weighed far less than before. He then moved to the fourth form and tested himself against training obstacles. He dodged a hard ball, cut through spiked bamboo, and realized that the sword art looked simple only because its true power was hidden in its precision. When logs were thrown at him, he had to advance to the fifth form to slice them apart. He then used the sixth form to extinguish candles placed in bamboo, and after that, he stepped outside to practice the seventh form. With each stage, his confidence grew until he finally reached the ninth form and collapsed from exhaustion. Even so, he was not satisfied, because he still could not reproduce the final form from his old life. He remembered his master teaching him about the sword art long ago. At first, Mujin had mocked it as impossible nonsense, especially the claim that one could cut down anything with a sword. But his master had insisted that the art had to survive, and since his friend had no one worthy to pass it on to, he wanted Mujin to inherit it. He explained that his late friend had been the only swordsman capable of facing him directly, even without chi, and that the techniques might have relied on movement arts instead. Mujin had laughed at the idea then, only to be knocked on the head by his master and forced to listen. His master told him that repeating the sword art 1,000 times would change his body, and repeating it 100,000 times would cause his chi to flow into the sword. If he swung it 1,000,000 times, he would become unstoppable even against the strongest swordsman. Mujin had been stunned by how long that would take, but his master had said it was the only way. That explanation had made Mujin curious about the identity of the friend who had once stood on equal footing with his master. When Mujin woke up, Sok was slapping him repeatedly to bring him back to his senses. Mujin realized that he still had a long way to go, since he had fainted after only one practice swing. Still, it was time to eat. When he saw the meal, he was disappointed to find pork, and he told Sok to get beef next time because it was better for building strength. He also told Sok that he could keep using the money borrowed from the Banko sect, since more could always be borrowed later. His plan was to eat beef for the rest of the time before the duel. Sok then asked how Mujin had learned all of these martial arts, since he had never known him to be capable of such things before. Since Mujin had already told his siblings the truth, he decided not to hide it from Sok either. He revealed that he was not the real Mujin, but the divine demon. Sok assumed that he was joking, but Mujin told him plainly that he would not leave the clan until it became the greatest in all of Sichuan. Sok teased him for saying nonsense, only to receive a painful flick to the head. After that, Mujin let him go. At the same time, the two clan elders were trying to flee with the children, fearing that Dobo would kill Mujin and leave the clan exposed. Meanwhile, Mujin continued training until he could hold the 70-kilo sword with one hand. His technique was still unstable, and only a week remained before the duel. While he sweated through another training session, Sun and Dujin came to check on him. Mujin told them to stay away because it was dangerous, but they said they were only worried because they had watched him push himself to the limit for days. Sun also admitted that she had not meant what she had said before, explaining that she had only been angry. Seeing the two children reminded Mujin of the siblings of his lover from his previous life. He patted them on the head and told them not to worry. The two kids began arguing over who was right and who was wrong, and their bickering reminded Mujin of the harsh training he had once endured under his master. At that moment, he finally realized that the most important part of the Peerless Nine Swords was the breathing technique. With that understanding, he told the children that he would win no matter what and ordered them to return to their room. The children left worried, but they believed things would be all right. Once Mujin was alone, he began practicing the breathing technique while swinging his sword with full force. With the help of that technique, he was able to release all the internal energy he had gathered at once. Before long, he understood the principle behind movement arts, a chi-based martial art in which internal energy was built through motion. Because movement arts were considered low-tier techniques, most people looked down on them. Mujin, however, used the breathing technique to make sword swinging far easier, and it gave him the power needed to cut down a statue. Meanwhile, Johan Bong spoke with Sok about Mujin's sudden change. Sok tried to explain it away by claiming that Mujin's improvement came from the one-session treatment he had gone through, but Joe was not convinced. He told Sok to report any further changes immediately. After that, Sok went to check on his master, only to find that he was training in an unusual position. When he tried to tell Mujin that the meal was ready, Mujin only replied that the training room was too small. Because of that, he decided that he would start using the clan's large training hall instead. When Mujin entered the hall, he found other warriors already training there, and they all turned to stare at him. Sok told them that Mujin needed the space to train alone and suggested that they move to another hall. The warriors, however, were puzzled that a half-dead-looking man was giving them orders. They did not even consider Mujin a real martial artist just because he carried a sword. Mujin noticed the hostility in the room and remarked on it. Some of the warriors seemed ready to oppose him, but the squad leader, Che Boon, told them to leave the hall for the young master. Still, it was clear that Chiel believed Mujin had lost his mind again. Mujin then stopped him and told him to act like a man and speak directly to him. Chiel turned back, and Mujin suggested that they settle things with a duel, since they were both swordsmen. Chiel refused at first, saying that Mujin was supposed to be the future leader of the clan. Mujin mocked him for being a coward and told him not to show his face if he could not keep his word. That was enough to make Chiel draw his sword. The battle began at once. Mujin slammed his sword into the ground and leaped forward in a bold, reckless move. Before Chiel could react, Mujin closed the distance and shoved him back. The warriors watching were stunned, because they had never seen a duel fought without swords. Mujin continued moving around Chiel with incredible speed, making him struggle just to keep up. Frustrated, Chiel demanded that Mujin stop dodging and fight him properly. Mujin finally decided to take him seriously, though only a little, and grabbed his sword. Chiel immediately began blaming Mujin for everything that had gone wrong in the clan, insisting that someone like him did not deserve to learn martial arts. He charged forward, but Mujin met him head-on with the ninth form of the peerless sword technique, which shook Chiel's internal energy badly. Mujin did not give him a chance to recover and followed up with a devastating punch to the face. Chiel was sent crashing to the floor, blood spilling as Mujin told him that things were going to be different now. As he lay on the ground, Chiel finally understood the truth. Mujin had truly changed. He could feel a terrifying determination burning through Mujin's body, unlike before. Chiel fell to the floor completely defeated, shocking Sok and the other warriors who had been watching. The others rushed over to check on their leader, who lay there unconscious. Mujin stood calmly as the victor and asked whether anyone still had a problem with the result. One of the warriors shouted that Mujin had used a cowardly trick. Chiel, however, pulled himself together and told the man to shut up, then admitted that he had genuinely lost. He bowed respectfully to Mujin and said that he had learned something from the fight. Mujin acknowledged the gesture and told him he was free to leave. As the warriors began stepping out of the hall, Mujin told Sok to go with them since he wanted to be alone. The defeated warrior still complained, claiming that Chiel had gone easy on Mujin, but Chiel bluntly said he had actually intended to leave Mujin half dead. When the man still refused to believe it, Chiel said he was serious. He admitted that he did not know the full story, but it was obvious that the young master had improved far more than anyone expected. Sok also wondered when Mujin had changed so much, but at the same time, he felt relieved that he had. That night, the two elders held a discussion about the upcoming duel. They had served the clan for more than 36 years and remained loyal throughout that time. The conversation turned to the Flame Emperor and how extraordinary he had been in his youth. He had been such a skilled young man that even the powerful Tang clan had acknowledged his talent. The elders had once been completely awed by his strength, and both of them had sworn loyalty to him. Zhou believed that someone was trying to break that loyalty, but Du argued that the real issue was the bloodline problem. He said they had watched over Mujin for 17 years, but the clan had been declining the entire time. In their view, they had already done enough, and they did not believe the Flame Emperor would blame them in the afterlife. They had gathered enough money to relocate and even managed to secure a few martial artists to help them. Du then told Zhou to leave first while he stayed behind to continue looking after Mujin. He also mentioned that the martial arts master from the Kongdong sect, hired by the Changhua group, would serve as the witness for the duel. Zhou was shocked, because everything about the arrangement sounded suspicious. The merchant group was clearly preparing to destroy what remained of the Hua clan. Du told Zhou to take the children and wait for him at the agreed location, even though he knew the news would shock them. Later, Mujin noticed that the amount of beef he was receiving had started to shrink, so he asked Sok why. Sok explained that the steward was only giving him a little money. Mujin was annoyed, but before he could push the matter further, Sok tried to show him some new clothes. Sok quickly ruined the mood by telling him that he actually looked better when he was covered in bandages. When it was time to leave for the duel, Mujin encountered Du outside the house. At first, He thought Du had come to stop him, but Du explained that he was only there to follow him to the duel. Mujin knew that Du was worrying too much, because all he intended to do was crush his opponent. So Sok and Du accompanied Mujin on the way to the arena. By the time they arrived, the place was packed with spectators and gamblers. Because the odds on Mujin were so high, many people had placed their bets on him. Mujin entered with lollipops in his mouth, which made the onlookers assume he was weak and even tempted some of them to cancel their bets. Once he stepped into the arena, he met Qian, who asked whether he truly intended to go through with the duel. Hearing that, the crowd started assuming that Mujin had been the one to request the match despite his weakness, and they began saying that his madness had returned. Mujin was furious that they were already painting him as the villain. He told Qian that he would not stand by and let her steal his clan's secret manual, which was exactly why the duel had to happen. The crowd was stunned to hear that a merchant group would go after a martial arts manual. Qian, however, remained confident and seemed certain that Mujin would pay for trying to act tough. With everything prepared, the host announced that Hanyang of the Kongdong sect would serve as the witness. Hanyang stood on the balcony looking calm and imposing, ready to carry out his duty. He told both Dobo and Mujin to fight fairly in front of the crowd. Then Dobo made a surprising statement, revealing that the martial outfit Mujin was wearing had been sent by him personally as a gift to mark Mujin's return. Mujin only smiled at that and pulled out his oversized sword, telling Dobo that he would have to return the rest of the goods after the duel. The crowd was shocked, because no one had ever seen someone enter a duel with such a massive weapon. They had all assumed the Flame Emperor was known for bare-handed martial arts. Even Du was shocked and asked Sok whether Mujin had said anything strange. At first, both Du and Sok thought Mujin should run since he seemed badly outmatched, but Sok was beginning to believe in him, and he said Mujin might actually have a chance. Du, however, remained doubtful. When both sides were ready, the referee rang the bell. Immediately, Mujin attacked Dobo with fierce aggression. He swung his huge sword with devastating force, and although Dobo barely avoided the strike, the blow shattered the ground beneath them. The spectators were stunned, because they had expected Mujin to be slow and weak, not fast and powerful. Even Dobo had been expecting an easy victory, so he was shocked by Mujin's speed. Mujin pressed forward and swung again, but Dobo blocked the attack, and the two stood toe to toe. The clash produced a violent sound and an impressive display of force. Qian was surprised that Mujin was lasting longer than she had expected, though she still believed that no matter how much he had trained, he was nowhere near Dobo's level. Mujin kept attacking with the heavy blade, but Dobo evaded the strikes with his flexibility. Eventually, Dobo landed a counterattack that sent Mujin backward, and he swore that he would leave Mujin in an even worse condition. He was confident that he could break a man's spirit. From the balcony, Du admitted that he was impressed by how long Mujin was holding on. Sok then told him that Mujin had not even shown his real trump card yet. Du did not believe it, but Sok insisted that Mujin had been secretly training on his own and that something far stronger was coming. As the duel continued, Mujin realized that his current strength was already on par with Dobo's, which made him question his training method. Even so, he was not worried. No matter how strong his opponent was, he knew he would win, and this time he intended to kill Dobo. At the same time, Zhou was transporting Mujin's siblings to safety. The children were asleep, and Zhou recalled Dou's words that he would stay behind to collect whatever remained of Mujin after Dobo was done with him. Zhou could not say for certain whether their decision was right, but they had already started, and there was no turning back. Back in the arena, Mujin and Dobo continued exchanging blows. Mujin remained calm, because he believed Dobo was still just a beginner compared to him. Their attacks kept colliding, and although the fight looked even, some in the crowd began to think Mujin might actually have the upper hand. Still, people around them started mocking him again, saying he was not impressive at all. Then Dobo launched a powerful strike aimed straight at Mujin. Du and Sok nearly fainted watching it, and all they could do was hope Mujin would somehow evade it. Sensing the attack, Mujin used the first form of the Peerless Nine Swords, the preemptive step. Dobo's strike landed, but Mujin's technique allowed him to block it, leaving the crowd stunned. Even Dobo was shocked and was forced to step backward. Realizing that Mujin was no longer fighting like the weak man he had expected, Dobo gathered his internal energy for one final strike. Mujin mocked him, saying that his energy buildup was far too slow, and then activated the second form of his technique. He dashed forward with overwhelming killing intent, forcing Dobo into a desperate struggle to block the attack. Dobo could not believe that he was being pushed back by Mujin, so he poured everything he had into defending himself. Even so, his sword shattered in front of him. Mujin's blade broke through and slashed Dobo down hard, sending him crashing to the ground. Qian screamed in panic as she called out Dobo's name. Dobo lay in a pool of blood, missing his right arm, and the duel was effectively over. Mujin walked over to the severed arm and said that he would take it as payment for 17 years of hatred. Qian was horrified, but Mujin coldly told her that the merchant group might still find a way to reattach it. Hen then leaped down to check on Dobo, and Qian rushed over as well. Hen confirmed that Dobo's energy core had also been destroyed. He looked at Mujin and asked whether he really had to go that far. Mujin acted confused and asked what Han meant. Han said that there had already been a clear gap in their skills, and the fight had been over long before. Mujin replied that Han seemed to have a very big mouth for someone with so much to say. He then asked whether it had really been necessary to use the 7-wand fist on a 5-year-old child who had no martial arts skill. With rage burning in his eyes, Mujin said that what he had done was only the beginning of settling a grudge that had lasted for 17 years. He warned Han and the others that the Hua clan would soon make them pay for everything they had done. Qian dropped to her knees in pain and swore that she would never forget what Mujin had done. As Mujin walked away from the stage, the crowd erupted in cheers. They were stunned by how completely he had crushed Dobo and impressed by the sword he had used, since they had never seen it before. The spectators became excited at the thought that a new martial master had risen. Du and Sok rushed over to Mujin, and he told them it was time to go home. As he walked away, he suddenly stopped and asked whether Du had already spent all the gold he had entrusted to him. Du nervously replied that only a little was left. Mujin then said that he might need to stop by the Bango sect again, because he would have to borrow more money. He then told Du that he did not care whether Dujo or the other martial artists wanted to leave, but if they ever tried to take his siblings away, there would be serious consequences. He said it with such murderous intent that Du nearly froze in place. Meanwhile, Mujin's siblings were yelling at Zhou for taking them away when they were supposed to be watching their brother's duel. Zhou knew the situation had changed the moment he read the letter that had just been delivered by Pigeon. Mujin had unexpectedly won. The letter also said that they had been discovered, and that Zhou should return to the house immediately. Terrified, Zhou hurried back while the children protested and wanted to return to see their brother. Later, Mujin told Du that it was time for him to deal with the Banko sect and said not to worry about him. Even though Mujin was now proving himself capable, Du warned him not to get involved with the social sect in any way. Mujin decided that the old man was overthinking things and said that he would not. After that, he left for the Bango sect with Sok following behind in fear that things would go badly. Mujin said that he could not delay matters any longer and told Sok to stay close. When he arrived at the Bango sect, Ma was shocked to see him again. Mujin said that he had come to repay his debts and mocked the sect for looking deserted. Mai tried to explain that most of the gamblers in the region had left because they had gone to watch Mujin's duel with Dobo. When Mujin heard that, he asked whether they had also run betting pools on the match. He immediately understood that the sect must have made a fortune by giving him the higher odds. Realizing that Mujin had already figured it out, Ma tried to avoid trouble by saying that they were grateful to him. Mujin was pleased, since everyone liked money in the end. Ma could feel the cold aura around Mujin and understood that he was filled with killing intent. Mujin then asked where the boss was, which startled Mai. He snapped that Mujin should not make him repeat himself, slamming his hand on the table in frustration. Before things could escalate further, the sect leader, Qianjil, entered the room. Mujin was surprised to see that the leader of the sect was such an ugly-looking man. Che admitted that his men had already informed him about Mujin, and Mujin bluntly asked why it had been so difficult to get an audience with him. He even insulted Che's appearance. Standing behind Che was another man whose presence carried a heavy, dangerous malice. Mujin asked whether that man was Che's servant, but it turned out that he was Black Crow from the social sect. Black Crow immediately scolded Mujin for staring at his money, and Mujin had to remind himself that he had been warned to avoid the social sect, only to end up facing one anyway. Mujin told him to shut his mouth if he did not want to die. Black Crow rushed at him in anger, which frightened Sok, but Mujin felt no threat at all. He threw a chopstick with tremendous force and pierced Black Crow's hand. At that moment, Black Crow realized that Mujin was no ordinary man and that he had to take him seriously. Mujin made it clear that he did not want praise from someone as worthless as Black Crow. Furious, Black Crow charged again, but Mujin met him halfway, vanished from sight, and reappeared behind him. Black Crow swung wildly, but Mujin easily avoided every attack, making it obvious that he was simply toying with him. Black Crow could not believe that someone as young as Mujin could dodge his strikes so effortlessly. Mujin then drove another chopstick into Black Crow's left eye, causing him to scream in agony. Black Crow collapsed to his knees and cursed Mujin, warning that the social sect would come after him for attacking one of their own. Mujin only grew more interested in what they could do and kicked him in the head, telling him to bring the social sect if they wanted revenge. Still, Mujin warned that Black Crow would not leave the room alive. At that point, Black Crow panicked and began begging for his life, offering Mujin anything he wanted. Mujin was surprised that he wanted to live so badly, but since Black Crow had offered wealth, he decided not to kill him immediately. Black Crow claimed that his money was in Chong, and he promised to bring it back. Mujin agreed but told him that if he failed to return he would die. Terrified, Black Crow fled, promising to come back as quickly as possible. Once Black Crow was gone, Mujin turned to Che, who was already shaking in fear, and told him that it was time to settle their debt. Che immediately fell to his knees and begged to be spared, promising to give Mujin everything he owned. Mujin laughed and told him that he had nothing left to offer, because all of Che's property was already going to belong to him. He explained that Che should count the money he had extorted from commoners and the lives he had ruined by manipulating martial clans as part of his assets. Che cried and said he would hand over everything, but that only angered Mujin. He shattered Che's skull, reminding him that he could not offer what he already possessed. Everyone watching was frozen in fear. Mujin then asked who was next in the command chain. Mai quickly stepped forward, introduced himself as the vice-sect leader, and fell to his knees, begging for mercy. He promised that he would live honestly if Mujin gave him another chance. Mujin decided to spare him. He then asked Ma how much Che's assets were worth, and Ma began listing them. He mentioned the house, the Banko sect's holdings, and a tribute from the Soul sect. bringing the total to more than 20,000 gold. Mujin told him he wanted all of it. Mi promised to prepare everything and bring it to him right away, and Mujin approved, glad that it would be handled without delay. After Ma left, Mujin turned to the remaining sect officers with a deadly expression and told them to start bargaining for their lives. That terrified them, and they quickly began begging to be spared. Later, Mujin returned home with several boxes of treasure and gold, shocking Du. He explained that each box contained about 400 gold. Du warned him that the Banco sect was backed by the Soul sect, but Mujin said the real issue was not the Soul sect itself, but the people allied with it. Du then mentioned that the sect also had Black Crow and Red Crow. When Mujin heard Black Crow's name, he casually said he had already dealt with him. Du was stunned. Mujin told Du not to compare him to Joe or any of the others, because anyone who came looking for trouble with the clan would end up 6 feet under. After that, he ordered Du to bring him beef and make sure his siblings were well fed when they returned. Du could hardly believe that Mujin had already frightened Black Crow, a man feared throughout the region. It became clear to him that Mujin was no longer the same person he had once known. Meanwhile, Choyan hired assassins to eliminate everything precious to Mujin, though she specifically ordered them to bring one of the children back alive. Long ago, the Manhwa clan had been one of the most respected martial clans in the land. The Flame Emperor had earned admiration from countless martial artists, even receiving praise from the prestigious Tang clan of Sichuan. Within a single generation, the clan had become impossible to ignore, and even the strongest martial artists hesitated before crossing them. People in Shichang once cheered when the clan's members walked through the streets. But after the Flame Emperor died, the next patriarch proved to be weak, and the clan slowly fell into decline. Loyal retainers left one by one, and the image of the great emperor was left split between memory and reality. Still, the name of that extraordinary man had not been forgotten. Because of the overwhelming aura Mujin now carried, the elders began comparing him to the late emperor. Not long after, wounded warriors arrived to report that they had been ambushed by assassins. Elder Joe and a few others were the only ones still fighting. As soon as Du heard the news, he realized the children were in danger. He told the warriors to notify Mujin immediately and ran ahead. In the forest, Joe stood his ground against the assassins after the warriors with him had been taken down. Even with danger closing in, he remained determined to protect the children. Just when he seemed about to be overwhelmed, Du arrived in time to help him. The assassins were furious, because they had almost succeeded before he showed up. Their leader shouted for them to kill the 2 men, and the battle resumed. Du managed to land a few blows, but age quickly began to work against him. The assassins gained the upper hand, and one of them cut his shoulder, driving him backward. Their leader ordered his men to kill one of the children. Du kept resisting, but another strike landed badly, and he collapsed in pain. With Du unable to continue, the assassins turned their attention to the children, asking which one should die. Dojin stood his ground to protect his sister, and the assassins decided that he would be the one to die. Just as they were about to strike, Mujin's voice echoed through the forest, ordering them to stop. He rushed toward them at frightening speed, looking every bit like a monster. The assassins, remembering only the weak version of Mujin, did not take him seriously. Their leader ordered his men to kill him. One assassin charged, but Mujin used him as the first target for his fury. He shattered the man's sword with almost no effort and followed with a vertical slash that cut him down. Without hesitation, he moved on to the rest of them. Seeing how dangerous he was, the assassin leader ordered his men to surround him. They rushed him together, but Mujin activated the 5th form of the Peerless 9 Swords, the Army Slayer technique, and sliced through them as though they were nothing. One assassin tried to attack from the side, but Mujin dodged and beheaded him. At that point, the surviving assassin finally realized that they were fighting a monster. Before he could act again, his right arm was severed, and he screamed in pain. Mujin warned him not to move if he wanted to keep living. When Mujin turned around, he saw Joe helping Du up, while Dojin covered his sister's eyes so she would not see the carnage. Dojan assured her that they had nothing to fear because Mujin had arrived and defeated the bad men. Mujin approached the children and asked if they were all right. Dojin said they were fine, and Mujin guessed that they must have been scared. Dojin insisted that he was not weak and that he was not the son of a martial master for nothing. Mujin felt relieved, patted him on the head, and told Elder Joe to take the wounded warriors and the children back to the estate. Once the others had gone, Mujin turned to the last assassin and told him to keep quiet about his missing arm. He then asked whether Changhua Merchant Group had sent him. The assassin hesitated, but Mujin told him that he might live if he answered honestly. That was enough to make the man confess that Choyan had hired them through the Death Forest faction. After the man revealed what he knew, he asked Mujin whether he would really spare him as promised. Mujin told him to run back to Chun and report that the group sent to attack his siblings had been wiped out. He also warned her to prepare herself because he would be coming for her head next. After that, Mujin walked through the streets soaked in blood, and everyone around him could only stare. The people who had looked down on him before no longer dared to do so, because none of them wanted to become his next victim. Many of them wondered whether the prodigy they had once known in his childhood had finally returned. After making sure he had drawn enough attention, Mujin returned home. Masak rushed forward to welcome him, but Mujin pushed his head aside and asked whether all the wounded warriors were in the medicine hall. Masak confirmed that they were, and added that Dojan and his sister were also resting in their rooms to recover their strength. Mujin was relieved to hear that and told Masak to prepare a bath for him. A short while later, Mujin soaked in the bath that had been prepared for him. As he rested, he thought about his siblings and his desire to keep them from being exposed to the uglier side of the world. Even though they were children of a martial clan, he did not believe they should be forced to witness cruelty so early in life. At the same time, he wondered whether he was simply projecting the fear of his own past onto them. The next day at the medicine hall, Mujin approached Elder Joe and asked about the Red Flame Art Manual. Joe was shocked by the request, and Mujin asked why he seemed so startled. Joe then asked why Mujin wanted the manual, clearly worried that he might relapse and cause trouble again. Mujin understood the concern and explained that he planned to train on his own, since Joe was currently out of commission. He also noticed that Joe doubted whether he could handle it, though Joe quickly denied that. Mujin reassured him that he had no intention of throwing a fit or causing trouble. Once Joe realized that Mujin had no bad intentions, he finally handed over the manual. After Mujin left, Joe voiced his concern to Du and asked whether it had been a mistake to give Mujin the manual. Du told him not to worry, because Mujin had been showing remarkable swordsmanship lately. He added that Mujin had been the reason they survived the assassination attempt. Du also said that Mujin seemed to have recovered, and he believed the Taoist's treatment was working. Joe agreed, but wondered whether the treatment was also improving Mujin's martial skill. Du agreed that Mujin's sudden progress was worth noting and suggested that he may have encountered a fateful opportunity. Joe, however, felt reassured and believed the clan's decline might finally be coming to an end. At the training ground, Mujin gathered his siblings and began training them. He explained that what he was teaching them was a fundamental movement technique based on his own real combat experience. The two children were impressed, but Soyeon interrupted and said she was surprised, since Elder Joe had claimed that Mujin had no real battle experience. Dojin was shocked that she had said it so bluntly. Mujin then cut off the discussion and told them to stop talking and attack him with the basic fist technique they had learned. The two of them took their stance and rushed him together, but Mujin was disappointed by their movements. Their performance made him wonder whether they were truly from a martial clan at all, because they lacked even the most basic footwork. Frustrated, he stopped the session and said they would train no longer that day because his head hurt. The two children were confused since they had not even touched his head. Mujin then lied and said they were more skilled than he had expected. He told them that for now, they only needed to strengthen their bodies before learning anything advanced. After they left, Mujin realized that he had a difficult task ahead of him, and that it would not be easy. He also understood that his own master must have gone through the same frustration while training him. Even so, Mujin was determined to restore the clan's former glory, because he considered himself responsible for what had happened to it. He also intended to defeat the one opponent he had failed to overcome in his previous life. He picked up his sword and resumed solo training. As he practiced, he noticed that the blade had become much lighter in his hands, and he could feel his speed increasing with every repetition of the sword forms. Several days later, Du and Joe finally returned to duty. Mujin told them that they had done everything he had asked and praised them for a job well done, though it was clear he wanted more. He angrily reminded them that if he had arrived even slightly later, the result would have been disastrous. He then warned the elders that if they ever pulled a stunt like that again, they would die. The two elders acknowledged their mistake, bowed to him, and apologized for acting foolishly. Soon after, the Taoist priest who had treated Mujin arrived. Mujin did not recognize him and had already insulted him before realizing who he was. Masak quickly explained that the man was the Taoist priest who had healed him. He apologized on Mujin's behalf, saying that Mujin had not fully recovered, which was why he was acting that way. Mujin then kicked Masak aside for speaking nonsense about him, before deciding to play along and apologizing for not recognizing the man earlier. He invited the priest to come inside, saying he must be tired from his long journey. Earlier, Masak had already told Mujin about the Taoist priest, explaining that he had inherited the Taoist lineage of the Wong sect. According to Masak, Mujin had been healed through the priest's positive energy treatment, and the chief steward had even paid a large sum to bring him there. Now, in the present, Mujin was glad to finally meet the man and invited him into the compound. He then asked whether it was true that the priest had inherited the Wong sect's Taoist lineage. The priest confirmed it proudly, claiming that he was the only Taoist inheritor of the true Wong lineage. The moment Mujin heard that, he stamped his foot and asked seriously whether the man was truly the Wong White Immortal, because he had never heard of any surviving successor to Wong's Taoist line. The priest tried to keep up the act, but Mujin warned him that he had a limited amount of time to come clean before he changed his mind. The priest pretended to be offended and asked whether Mujin was doubting the person who had healed him. In response, Mujin drew his large sword and said that if the man truly was a Taoist, then dodging a strike should not be a problem. He swung the blade, missing the old man by a hair, but the attack carved a huge dent into the floor. Ma and the elders panicked. Believing Mujin had lost control, Mujin ordered them to shut up and bring water, because he wanted to show them something amusing. When the water arrived, he splashed the priest with it. The priest still tried to maintain his act, asking whether this was how the clan repaid kindness. Mujin ignored him, grabbed the man's long beard, and pulled it off, revealing that it was fake. Everyone was shocked, and even the priest realized he had been exposed. Mujin mocked him for even trying to glue the beard on carefully. The priest was then left facing Mujin and the retainers, and Mick asked what Mujin intended to do with him. Mujin replied that he had no intention of letting him go easily and suggested that he might cut off his limbs and make him useless instead. The priest immediately panicked and begged for mercy. Mujin told him he had no interest in killing him, because then there would be no way to recover his money. He said he only wanted to cut off his limbs, but the priest pleaded desperately, promising that he would return everything he had stolen. Mujin accepted the deal, though he added that he would also charge him for not cutting off his limbs and manhood. Terrified, the priest said he would pay any amount as long as Mujin left him intact. Mujin then asked Du how much the priest had taken from him. Du admitted that he had paid the man 50 gold Nying. Mujin was disappointed that Du had been so gullible, though Du defended himself by saying he had heard the priest was a great healer. Mujin turned back to the priest and told him that his first task would be repaying the 50 gold. The priest claimed he would return the money, but said it was currently at his residence in Jinyang. Mujin immediately told him to lead the way. Even though Jinyang was 4 hours away, Du and Zhou asked whether they should come, but Mujin told them there was no need, since they were still recovering. He ordered them to stay home and make sure nothing went wrong. As he left with the priest, Du sensed Zhou's worry and told him to trust Mujin, because he was no longer the man he used to be. Soon after, they reached the priest's carriage, and Mujin was surprised by how luxurious it was. The interior was lined with cotton and leather, showing that the priest clearly lived well from his scams. Mujin was even more amused when he climbed inside and saw how carefully decorated it was. The priest explained that he traveled often, so comfort was necessary. Mujin smirked and remarked that the priest had quite a work ethic for someone who was supposedly a healer. He then asked why someone with real skills was not doing honest work. The priest lowered his head and promised that from that point on, he would do legitimate work. Mujin then lay down comfortably and told the priest to wake him when they arrived. The priest agreed, but deep down he was already thinking about harming Mujin. After several hours of travel, the carriage stopped in a quiet, isolated forest. The priest stepped out to meet an acquaintance, who turned out to be a bandit. He told the man that Mujin was asleep inside the carriage and ordered him to drag Mujin out and make an example of him. The bandit was eager to do it, saying he did not understand why anyone would interfere with a Taoist's business. He stepped into the carriage and threw a punch at Mujin, but just before the blow landed, Mujin turned and blocked it with his sword. Smiling coldly, Mujin asked whether they had already arrived. Then he sent the bandit flying out of the carriage, shocking the priest. The bandit felt the force of the blow ripple through his body and realized that the reports about Mujin had been true. He decided to get serious. Mujin stepped out of the carriage and asked why their destination had turned into an isolated forest. He quickly realized that the priest was also trying to target him. He had thought the man was only a scammer, but now he understood that he had more schemes planned. Mujin did not mind, since he had been looking for action anyway. He released an overwhelming aura and told the bandit he wanted to see what he was made of. The bandit sensed the pressure and called for the rest of his gang. 3 more large men appeared, and it turned out they were known as Zhongshan's 4 demons. Mujin could see that they were using demonic energy, though he did not say anything yet. He commented on the variety of their weapons and said he wanted to see the depth of their skills. Without hesitation, he rushed their leader and separated him from the others. He kept the man on the defensive with a relentless series of attacks. The others quickly realized that Mujin had singled out their leader, so they moved to help him. Even the leader admitted that Mujin's strikes felt like blows from a heavy mace. He soon lost his balance and Mujin kicked him in the face, crushing his mouth. The others arrived just in time, and one of them swung an axe at Mujin. But Mujin dodged easily and answered with a powerful elbow to the man's stomach, making him scream in pain. The other 2 tried a pincer attack, but Mujin slipped away, forcing them to overextend. That gave Mujin enough room to punch one of them to the ground. He then went after the last man, whose sword shattered when he tried to block Mujin's attack. Mujin nearly cut him in half, but held back at the last moment. Terrified, the man saw his life flash before his eyes. Mujin then kicked him hard in the chest and sent him flying. With all 4 defeated and kneeling, Mujin confirmed that they were indeed using demonic arts. That left him wondering why demonic arts had appeared in the Central Plains. He saw them as younger disciples and did not want to kill them. Before he could decide what to do, their leader begged for mercy and admitted defeat. The priest realized he was in trouble, because Mujin had easily crushed Zhongshan's 4 demons. The leader confessed that they had already understood Mujin was far above them after the first few exchanges. Mujin asked why they had continued fighting if they already knew they were outmatched. He told them he would spare their lives, but only after destroying their energy cores and severing their meridians. The leader immediately fell to his knees and begged him not to ruin their lives as martial artists, saying they had only obeyed orders. Mujin told him to stop whining, because they were already old enough to know better. He then asked who had taught them. At first, the leader acted confused, but Mujin clarified that he wanted to know their master. Mujin had seen the demonic energy clearly, even if their use of it was pathetic. He wanted to know who had taught them such arts. The leader admitted that they did not know the master's name. Mujin was enraged by this, because he could not believe they were disciples who did not even know their teacher's name. The leader explained that their master had never told them his name and had ordered them not to look for the other disciples. Mujin told them they should have simply kept their heads down and studied their art instead of turning to banditry. The leader quickly corrected him, saying they were not thieves. He explained that they only helped with their brother's business on the side. Mujin was shocked that they would knowingly support someone like Yong-su. The leader said they believed Yong-su was in the business of saving lives. Mujin decided to let the four go and warned them to stop acting as lackeys for Yong-su. He told them he would kill them himself if he ever saw them doing evil again. The leader thanked him for showing mercy, and Mujin turned to Yong-su, telling him that the amount he owed had just gone up. In fact, he would now be paying for damaging Mujin's mental state as well. Yong-su was horrified. After the carriage left, the four brothers suddenly realized that Mujin was worthy of respect and might even be their master. They ran after the carriage and stopped it. Mujin stepped out, wondering why they had stopped, only to find the four of them bowing before him and calling him boss. They pledged their loyalty and begged him to take them in, promising to serve him until death. Mujin assumed they must still be dazed from the beating and tried to dismiss them. But the four insisted even more strongly, saying they were still young and needed someone to follow. Mujin was surprised, since they all looked old and miserable to him. Also, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and like the video. Thank you for watching and see you next time.